Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back into another episode, opening up another podcast to talk about our favorite team, the Arizona Cardinals. And we got a special guest here today covering his respective team, the Washington Commanders. What's up, Craig? And thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to be with you guys. Excited to have a chat and get a slightly different shade of red going in the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you for coming on here as well. I think one of the biggest topics to talk about is, the draft. It gets excitement from the Cardinals fans, and I'm assuming from the Commanders fans as well, because you guys had a lot of changes this offseason, which we're going to be diving into here pretty soon. But I want to go ahead and just give about 1 minute, 30 seconds for you to shout yourself out and, how long you've been a Commanders fan or how long you've been covering the team and where they can find you.
Yeah, shout out to me. So I'm a radio host here in Washington, D.C. I host a daily afternoon drive radio show, The Hoffman Show, on the Team 980 that does stream live here on YouTube at the Team 980. And we also cut up clips of that show on that channel and on my channel at Craig Hoffman. I also host a podcast on the Commanders with former Washington tight end and Niners tight end and Bears tight end and Texans tight end, Logan Paulson, who played 10 years in the league and is one of the smartest analysts, in my opinion, in the covering the league, period. He's kind of our hidden gem here in D.C., and I'm lucky enough to talk to him a couple times a week on a podcast called Take Command. I've been covering the team since 2015. Was in Dallas for a couple years before that. I've been a beat reporter, and then for the last couple of years, I've been doing the daily radio show. So that's who I am, and excited to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Well, let's get started here. A lot to dive into. Let's first talk about the brand new staff that you ended up bringing in here. A lot of different changes is happening. And obviously we got Kliff Kingsbury in the corner here because that is a person that we shared. So let's dive into real quick. Dan Quinn, how do you feel about that? What's that going to do for the Commanders? And then we'll dive into Kliff a little later.
Yeah, Dan is, I think, an underrated hire. And I think it's funny. We actually did this topic on my radio show last week. Have fans turned on Dan Quinn? And I mean that in a good way, not turned on in a bad way. Turned on like, oh, we didn't really like that, and now we've turned into really liking him. Seeing the kind of staff he put together, of which Kliff, I think, is the biggest question mark, and we can talk about that obviously more in a few minutes. But also the free agents coming in. You see a guy like Bobby Wagner sign, and you're like, whoa, that dude wasn't signing. If Dan Quinn's not here, their history, how well respected he is. And I think he just he's got the right focus. And I think Ron Rivera had the wrong focus. He was a headline chaser in a lot of ways and wasn't really, I think, capable of honing in on what needed to happen to win, nor did he have the skills particularly to do it. Where Dan Quinn is someone who understands that in order to win on a major level, you first have to focus on competing. And that is the big thing. That is the focus for this team right now, is like one step at a time. How do we get back to being competitive? And then we can worry about being good. That is obviously in conjunction with the new GM, Adam Peters, who I think is equally as, if not more important. He's the former assistant general manager in San Francisco, is credited with a lot of their scouting success over the past couple of years. So I think Dan's focus as a coach plus Adam's scouting prowess, if they both do the things they're supposed to do, could lead to that kind of Super Bowl level success here in DC if it all goes right. And obviously, as we'll get to later, that'll start with the number 2 pick in the draft and getting a quarterback, which they haven't had here in a long time.
Absolutely. Now, we mentioned about the fact that Kliff Kingsbury is now the offensive coordinator over there in DC. So I guess what are your thoughts on him? And then me and Justin / Mythic, we'll go ahead and let you know, I guess, his time here for the Arizona Cardinals and how we really feel about him. Go ahead and put your thoughts on Kliff.
So I was definitely not super pumped about Kliff initially. I think the more I've learned about him and the more Logan and I on our podcast have gone back and looked at some of the stuff from his time in Arizona, the more we've warmed to the idea of him. And I'm sure you guys have takes on this in terms of like, if that dude had been just allowed to run the offense when he was in Arizona versus being a head coach, like what does that look like? Well, he's just the OC here. But I think that I came into the very West Coast Kyle Shanahan Sean McVay tree bias. I covered Sean when he was the OC here. Logan, just his background for your audience who probably is like, I vaguely remember that name, but like that dude wasn't like a star tight end. You're correct. He was not. He was mostly a third tight end blocking type of guy. But Logan survived in the league based off his brain. And Kyle Shanahan brought him to multiple stops around his career after Kyle was unceremoniously booted from Washington. And that includes kind of what they're trying to do right now in D.C. when Kyle got to San Francisco, which is we need to bring in vets who know the system And Kyle brought Logan to San Francisco in 2017 when he got there. And so a lot of the way that I look at football from my own experience covering Sean McVay and Jay Gruden and Kevin O'Connell and that kind of tree of offense, and working with Logan all these years, who comes from the Kyle tree, is very West Coast based. And so getting a guy in Kliff who wasn't the guy running the predominant system in the league right now, gave me a ton of question marks. And I also think that system can be designed so well to insulate quarterbacks. And so I think the more I look at what Kliff did in Arizona, understand that he's not afraid to run the football. He will do that. That he is good at getting the ball out of guys' hands quickly, and like deleveraging the quarterback is a phrase that we used a lot last year as Eric Bieniemy heinously failed to do that to Sam Howell. I think that I'm more excited about Kliff. Clearly, he's got a lot of respect within the league. A lot of defensive coaches are like, I hated playing that guy. A lot of people seem to really like him as a dude. And so I think that there's a lot of good, a guy like Zach Ertz, by the way, who's like as well respected and liked as anybody that I know in the NFL. The fact that he's like, yeah, I want to play for Kliff, I think that means a lot and goes a long way. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what Kliff Kingsbury is going to build here. His staff is great. The fact that he got Anthony Lynn, Brian Johnson, I do have questions about how it all fits together. I'm a little scared of a Carolina 2.0 where they had a bunch of good coaches, none of whom had worked together before, and there wasn't seemingly a cohesive plan. But if they can be on the same page, and I think DQ helps a lot here because he will not tolerate not being on the same page. I think that there's a lot of potential long-term with the staff that was built, and Kliff being at the top of it.
Perfect. Justin, any thoughts on the new coaching staff or any questions?
I think you touched on it very perfectly with the whole Kliff Kingsbury being a head coach versus offensive coordinator. That is one of the things that we have been pitching, but obviously he's not going to take the demotion from the Arizona Cardinals. He'll take it somewhere else. Obviously went to college for a year and then came back to the NFL. He wasn't going to take a pure demotion. Like, hey, we're going to take you as a head coach, and we think you'd better be suited for an offensive coordinator position, which we personally believe that. I believe, Mike, you agree. As an OC, he would have been a lot better, but he just wouldn't have taken that. I think Kliff Kingsbury does have a great offensive mind, and that he does have the talent in Washington now. And like you said with Zach Ertz, obviously players do love him. You're not signing Zach Ertz if players don't love him. I still have a little bit of question marks personally for Kliff Kingsbury because, we saw a lot of things in Arizona that were a bit interesting. We had so much talent, and we only had one good productive season with him here. But I am very interested to see, because this is something that I genuinely wanted. And I think you guys have a fantastic staff with Dan Quinn as well. Very interested to see how that offense goes, because you guys have the talent to be fantastic. It rides heavy on quarterback play and how that number 2 pick does transition to the NFL. But you guys do have the talent to surround potentially Jaden Daniels or whoever you guys want to go with. So it is going to be exciting for sure.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with the whole Kliff Kingsbury thing. I think we've kind of chimed on that multiple times here for the past couple of years. It's just we just never felt like he was a head coach at the end of the day. He might be an offensive guru because that's what we were signed up for, offensive guru. And we were like, let's go. And then there was a time where he did very well and we were riding on the Kliff train, but like that completely derailed real quickly. And then when it was bad, it was really, really bad. So a lot of Cardinal fans, breathe a sigh of relief when we ended up moving on, but like nobody hates him personally. He was a cool dude. Honestly, he seemed like a real cool, awesome, chill guy, and people obviously want to play with him. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what really matters here. So let's go ahead and dive into, Justin, let's go ahead and move over to the Sam Howell situation. The reason why we're talking about that is because you traded him over to one of our division rivals. So go ahead.
He is in Seattle now. So do you guys think you guys gave up on Sam Howell too quick, or do you think it was the perfect move as you guys are positioned at number 2? Do you like the trade overall? What are your just overall thoughts?
Yeah, so the way I've been phrasing it is this. I think Sam Howell got a raw deal in DC, but it's not Adam Peters' job to do what's best for Sam Howell as a commander. It's his job to do what's best for the team. And when you have the number 2 overall pick, you have a responsibility to explore your options. And in a draft that is pretty well thought of in terms of the quarterback class, I think you can either take one or trade back and get more picks and take one. So I think that is probably the plan. I think the most likely scenario, despite the fact that trading back is more fun to talk about, and we've certainly done it because I do think that there's a lot of questions about that number 2 pick, and we'll get there, I'm sure, eventually. But I think with Sam, he had value. This is a draft that a lot of people think is 90 to 100 players deep, and you picked up pick 67, and that was pick 103, I think, is now 67. And you're like, shoot, like that's another potential starter, maybe even starter in year one, depending on the position. And so I think that, and not to mention you have more maneuverability, like that 3rd round pick on all these draft charts is really valuable. If you want to say trade back with Minnesota, get their haul, and then trade back up to like 5 or I don't know, 4. You guys want to talk? You guys want to chat? So I think that's the kind of thing that you're thinking about there with Sam is like, we just need to get the piece that's more movable or more valuable to us. But I do think Sam's a good player. Like he showed a lot through 10 weeks last year. I would have told you he's the quarterback of the future in Washington. And the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks were horrendous.
Yeah.
He just didn't grow. But I also think a lot of that had to do with Eric Bieniemy. And like, I don't want to bash EB. I like EB personally, in a lot of respects. I think he goes to work the same every single day. Like he cares a lot. He tries really hard. And I think he's really smart. But as a play caller, as a primary play caller, it was a disaster. Like truly I would call this, I don't say this lightly, an unprofessional job last year. The quality was that bad. You can't drop Sam Howell back like he's Patrick Mahomes. And that's what they did to him. And so if you put him in a far more insulated environment where he can play to his strengths, his weaknesses are hidden, I think he could be good. And maybe Seattle's that place if Geno either doesn't have a good year or if he gets hurt and Sam winds up playing. I think that, getting him a big receiver in DK Metcalf, a guy who can get like college open in the pros in JSN, like and obviously like Lockett's seemingly always open behind the defense. I don't know how that works 10 years running, but hey, 16's open back there somewhere. I think Sam can really play well in a system that way. So yeah, I think it was a smart move for both teams. I'm okay with the return. And the other element too is I think you had to move on. I think that there were enough people in the locker room and certainly enough people in the fan base that were super attached to Sam that clean break matters, and getting a kind of refresh, clean slate whether, especially if it's Drake May, who knows Sam and is like his buddies with Sam because they were together at North Carolina, not having any kind of conflict there was good. I think a lot of people are upset in the fan base, and I kind of get it, that Marcus Mariota wound up being the guy they bring in. But at the end of the day, free agency is free agency. You get who you can get. And I don't know that Jacoby Brissett, who was here last year and who I would have preferred and who most people would have preferred, really wanted to come back. So them's the breaks.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that. And I feel like Sam Howell does have a lot of potential because this is technically his first season. He's 2 years in the league, but this was technically his first season as a full-time starter. And it was 21 touchdowns, 21 picks, I believe, almost 4,000 yards. There's a lot of upside to Sam Howell. And like you said, that first half of the season, I would have told you as well. He's like the guy in Washington. I was getting sold. And obviously teams do give up on quarterbacks a lot very early on in their careers. It would be 1-2 seasons they're shipped out. Yeah. There's not a fair chance like it used to be, like where you're sitting behind a quarterback for 2-3 years to learn a system. And then you come in and implement the offense, kind of like Jordan Love. But at the same time, you guys do hold that 2 overall pick, which makes it very difficult. So I feel like it was the right decision, and Seattle did get a potential quarterback, because I don't think Geno's the answer. Obviously, Geno's like 32, 33 years old on the back end. I don't know how many good years he has left. I think Sam Howell will take over at some point this season. That's just my prediction.
Young, by the way.
He's 23, 24?
Sam's younger than some of the guys that are coming out in this class, but as you mentioned, it's the contract, right?
Yeah.
It's the fact that he's halfway through a rookie deal, and you're going to have to pay him in a couple of years versus restarting the clock. And I think, too, Sam's upside is probably between, if I'm going to be generous, it's probably between 20 and 10. Like he's somewhere in that middle third of quarterbacks. When you have the number 2 pick, you're trying to get a guy that can be top 10.
Generational.
So you want to raise that ceiling. And I think the issue is, despite all the upside you saw, you also saw the stuff that you were concerned about coming out, showing up week in, week out on tape. And it's like, oh, well, that's why he was a 5th round pick despite all that talent. Then maybe we were right about that, and we should just move on. And I think that's kind of what happened. Yeah,
I don't blame you guys whatsoever. So I feel like it was a good deal for both. Personally, I feel like it was a fantastic decision. And whether it's Jaden Daniels or Drake May, it's going to work out.
Before we move on to the next topic, actually, now that you brought Eric Bieniemy, that was actually pretty fascinating to see how that was kind of handled. Was there anything like on the side of like the DC side in terms of like what you've been hearing in terms of like just kind of the way that you guys handled it? Was there any like frustrations from Eric Bieniemy? Did you guys hear anything about it? Because it almost kind of felt like from the national media that literally it was just like he was kind of in limbo for a very long time, and then he's let go, and then brand new regime. Was there anything from Eric Bieniemy that he said anything or like frustrations?
No, I mean, EB showed up to work and did his job, and that included, by the way, after the season, he was kind of the guy in charge of the football operation. They weren't doing a whole lot, but like, when they fired Rivera, it was up to the next staff to decide. And if Dan Quinn wanted to keep EB, it would have been really stupid to fire him and then have to rehire him and redo his contract. So you just wait. And that's, he got stuck in limbo. Yeah, but like, that's the league. Clearly they didn't put a lot of restrictions on him. Dude was in the Chiefs locker room during the playoffs. So it's not like they were, really restrictive of anything. And had he had an opportunity, I'm sure that they would have let him interview at the very least. But at the end of the day, like, Eric didn't do a good job. And I think that's kind of gets lost by the national media because it is on its face. And I was screaming about this a year ago. Like, it is absurd on its face, based off the resume, that this dude has never gotten a head coaching job. And it screams with some of the racial problems and such in the NFL. But also, eventually, you just go like, I don't know, 15, 16 teams, these clubs that will do anything to win. And then you start to see it kind of up close, and you're like, oh, there's some real issues here with how he communicates, how he worked his staff. Like, there were definitely complaints, and some of it probably was people being soft. Like, they needed to work harder. They didn't have the winning mentality here. But some of it was overkill. Some of it was, dude, you need to chill. And it rubbed a lot of players the wrong way. I think Charles Leno and Logan Thomas are two vets that kind of spoke up about this. And so I think at the end of and then you just look at the results on the field, like put all the personality stuff aside, because even those guys would be like, I respect that he came up and was consistent and showed up to work every single day, even if I didn't always love how he did it. Right. But to drop Sam Howell, who has a huge sack issue back, literally more than anyone else in the league outside. I think he wound up with one less drop back than Mahomes by the end of the year, to not utilize the screen game. And it's like, it's drop back, right? Because like passing attempts is one thing. And that's really the stat I'm talking about, but it's not like it's super deleveraged, like ton of screen game, a lot of quick game. It's like, no, dude, you're going to drop back. You're going to go through a progression. That's
pure
really
progression
hard.
passing for Sam Howell.
And you're just like, what are you doing? And so, long story short, sorry, I probably just took up way too much of our time with an Eric Bieniemy side rant, but like, he didn't do a good job, and that's why he's at UCLA.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. And let's move on over to the number one target here in the draft, which is pretty fascinating. You guys hold the second overall pick in the NFL draft. You mentioned a potential trade back, but now that Sam Howell's gone, is that still realistic out there for the DC fan or the Commander fans out there?
Depends on which fans you ask. There are some that are that are threatening to quit rooting for the team if they trade back. There are some that are threatening to quit the team if they don't trade back. There are some that are threatening to quit the team. Imagine going through the entire Dan Snyder era and then putting your entire fandom on whether or not they take Jaden Daniels or Drake May. But
insane.
That's the season that we're in. Welcome to screwy, wacky draft season. People have really strong opinions on these two quarterbacks. And I think it comes down to this. This is where I am. Forget everyone else's opinion for a second. I have a ton of questions about both of these guys. Jaden was a late bloomer. I always have questions about guys that are super late bloomers. Some have really worked out. Joe Burrow. Some have really failed. You certainly have questions about the frame. Nate Tice has talked about this extensively. He did a fairly extensive research project for Yahoo. And of course, you always you can listen to him on the Athletic Football Show. He's talked about it there as well. And basically, the only quarterback that has had any consistent success playing in the NFL at less than 205 pounds is Kirk Cousins. And the reason is because if you don't get the ball out now in the NFL at less than 205 pounds, these defensive linemen are so strong, they will tear you down with one hand through an offensive lineman. And it's not about durability and it's not about injury. It's about the ability to withstand contact in the pocket. And now, if you're going to overcome that, a running skill set like Jaden Daniels would seem pretty useful. And so but that leaves questions, right? And then with Drake May, there's some times where he looks like a potential Hall of Famer. And there's a lot of scouts that I really like in media types, Trevor Sikkema at PFF, Nate. These guys are like, this dude's one of the best prospects I've evaluated in the last 10 years. And sometimes I watch him and it looks like he forgot how to play football because his footwork is all over the place. And it's funny because I talked about that with Nate and he's like, oh yeah, no, that's true. And I'm like, okay, you just, it's a weighting issue. Like I weigh that more as a huge issue where Nate's like, that's something that can be fixed with coaching. And so with that said, with those levels of questions, if you tell me I can get 2 firsts for a guy I'm not real sure about or 3 firsts from Minnesota, I'm probably taking the trade, especially if I like McCarthy, for instance, as the fourth guy, and I feel like I can get back up and get him. But realistically, you're doing this whole franchise reset. You have the second pick. How often are you going to get it? Probably take the swing. I'd probably take it at May, but I also there's a part of me that likes Daniels more, and I'm just trying to, with May, listen to people who I think are smarter than me that do this year round for a living on the draft stuff. So there's a whole bunch of confusion in word vomit form.
No, there should be. I mean, when it comes down to obviously the draft, I think most people have May listed at the top, but I think that at least when I think of Kliff Kingsbury, I could see more of a quarterback for him trying to develop as Daniels, like for you guys to pick someone like him. But I mean, obviously that's just my opinion here. What are your thoughts, Justin, on that?
Oh man, this is tough. Like, this is something I've teeter-tottered on back and forth. And when you watch the tape, like you said, Drake May either looks like the best prospect you've ever seen, or it looks like he's just completely lost. It kind of reminds me of like Josh Allen, just bad footwork, bad everything. Like, there's just a lot of flaws in his game. It's like, do you take a swing on a guy who just has like all this raw potential and just pray coaching fixes him up and like pushes him to that star level that you believe he can get to? Because like, it worked for Josh Allen. I mean, people were crapping on the Bills for taking him in the first round, and it panned out perfectly for him. And then Jaden Daniels, I'm watching his tape and I'm like, okay, he's able to make very tight window throws. He's able to run the ball. And it's like, okay, it's like, this kind of fits Kliff a little bit better. But I'm sitting here just like, it's tough, man. The number 2 spot is tough because the Bears taking Caleb Williams, no hesitation. And then it's like, okay, what do you guys do now? Because the trade back is something that you guys could take a swing at. Let's say Minnesota does call. I think you guys are definitely picking up the phone and listening, because Minnesota seems to be doing due diligence on 2, 4, 5. They're trying to trade up. So if you guys can get a haul, because 2 is going to be a lot more valuable than 4 for Minnesota for sure. And we're connected at number 4 too. So we're hearing the rumors too. I'm assuming that haul for 2 is going to be ridiculous. And if they pick up the phone and offer something crazy, both first rounds, more picks on top of that, I'm sure you guys take that.
Yeah, it's going to look something like 23 and 11 this year, the first next year. They don't have a second next year. That's how they got the extra first this year. And then at least a 6th next year, if not 5th, 4th next year. Like, you're going to have to do a lot. Or like, let's get a second in 2026. Like, that's the deal where I'm like, okay. But then I also have so much ammo with what I have already and what you just acquired to not stay at 11. And go back up. Like, we just did our latest mock draft on Take Command, which people can watch here on YouTube. We do a kind of a fun thing where, like, if you're listening on the audio, it still works. But if you watch our mock drafts on YouTube, we have like the mock draft simulators. You can kind of see our war room up, which is a good time. And we traded back to 11. We took the Minnesota deal, and then we wound up trading back up to 6 because all of a sudden the Patriots took, I think it was Joe Alt at 3, and Jaden fell. And we're like, we got all this stuff and Jaden Daniels? Sick. And so I think we wound up with like Daniels, like Tyler Guyton at 23. And like, that's the play. To me, that's, and I made this analogy. I had a YouTube commenter asking me earlier, like, so you want to trade back admitting that Drake is the better prospect? And I'm like, yes, but it's not that simple. Because let's say Drake, for this analogy purposes, is worth $5 and Jaden's only worth $4. Okay, well, you want the $5 quarterback, not the $4 quarterback. Well, what if I tell you get either the $5 quarterback or the $4 quarterback and a $3 left tackle? Well, now I got $7. 7 is more than 5. Give me the 2. And that's kind of how I think of this totality. But I also really struggle with this because they're so different as players. And there are, by the way, things that I think meld well with Kliff for both of them. Jaden has a lot of experience throwing outside the numbers. As you guys well know, Kliff loves to throw the ball outside. And with the personnel he's going to have here in Washington, Jahan, Terry on the outside, like, that's going to be something that's really important. And Jaden has a lot of experience doing that at a very, very high level. He's probably the best deep ball thrower in the class, et cetera, et cetera. The running ability is something, obviously, Kliff has leveraged. But the RPO type of part of his offense, Drake actually has more experience with. Drake's a better over the middle of the field thrower, which I think is what Kliff probably also, like, down in, down out. Like, you need to be ready to throw outside, but down in, down out, like, we're going to make a lot of money over the middle of the field. So there's a lot of different elements to this that I think are confusing, confounding. You can say, like, this fits here, this doesn't. Which means that the options to me are actually all pretty good, but it's hard to separate them, which I think is the hardest part.
If you had to take a guess today, just like out of the blue, who do you think it's going to be? Do you guys think you stick it to?
I think they stick it to and take Drake May. You just don't overthink it. But I definitely think Minnesota's going to make that really hard, because here's the other part of this, right? Quickly, if they want Drake, they got to get to 2.
Yeah.
And like, how desperate are you, Kevin O'Connell, my old, very tall friend, to get Drake May?
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
All right. For sake of time here, let's move on over to thoughts on cards. Just real quick questions, if you want to shoot at us here. What are your thoughts, I guess, in the overall from the Nationals perspective? Any questions you have for the Cardinals?
I mean, for the Commanders' perspective, my biggest pressing question is DJ Humphries still good? Because the one area they didn't really address in free agency was left tackle, and I'd like to go into the draft with some kind of insurance policy there, and the familiarity with Kliff makes him interesting.
Justin, you want to take this?
The thing with DJ Humphries is left tackles are so hard to come by in the NFL. That's like one of the premier positions, especially on offense, that you desperately need. You want to find that guy to protect your quarterback. And DJ Humphries has been that for how long? 8 seasons in Arizona? Like, he's been fantastic. But these past 2 seasons in particular, it's been a lot of holding calls, injuries, just a lot of concerns. And it's just like it just hasn't been the same DJ Humphries. Now, if you guys can get him on like a 1-year deal, I would probably do it, because he's not going to be able to be ready till like week 6, week 7 later on because of the ACL. And the familiarity with Kliff Kingsbury, I think, presents a real possibility for him to land there. It wouldn't be the worst thing to take a flyer on him, but in Arizona, his time is definitely up with Paris Johnson. And you don't draft a tackle at 6 to play him at right tackle. You play him at left tackle, the position that is desperately needed. And DJ Humphries goes down. It's just the timing of everything made sense. But in my opinion, it's not the worst thing to take a flyer on. I probably wouldn't be opposed, especially with your desperate need of a left tackle.
Yeah, and I think one of the other reasons why we let him go as well, or release him, is because the amount of cap that we're getting back is just crazy.
For sure.
$15 million definitely opened up a lot.
The budget decision is very different to sign him to a 1 year here in DC than the one that you guys were looking at. In Arizona. I guess my other question, real quick, for you guys would be, how did you see I think Gannon did a good job last year, even though the talent was completely, like, the cupboard was completely barren. That team played hard. Yeah. They competed. What was it that Gannon and his staff did that allowed that to happen in year 1, despite the talent? Because I think Washington probably has a little bit better roster than Arizona had last year with some of these free agent moves that they've done. But it's ultimately, that's the goal, is how do you compete this year, not win this year? So how did you guys see that happening in year 1 under Gannon and company?
You want to touch on this, and then I'll bounce off?
Yeah. Well, my perspective with this is I guess just who we had prior, and this is not to put all on Kliff Kingsbury, but like there's this big culture that we don't have at all. And I think when we had Jonathan Gannon come in, he just kind of brought a level of energy that was very infectious. And we've heard it throughout the entirety of the offseason, where we even heard DJ Humphries come out and say it's a culture, not a culture change, it's a culture shock, right? And that kind of, blew up the headlines here in Phoenix. So there's just a completely different culture that kind of came around. And being that we did have Kyler Murray in the last 8 games also did spark up some level of, okay, well, maybe we can start making some noise, because in those first 2 games, when we played you guys early on and when we played the Giants, there was a level of, hey, we probably should have won that game at the end, and that's without Kyler Murray. So I believe these players truly believe that this system could work. We're just a quarterback away. When we had Kyler Murray come back, now granted, now we don't care that we lost what we lost, because we're looking for the draft. But I think truly believe these players really feel that this is the right guy. Now, they probably believe that in year 1 of Kliff Kingsbury too, but there's just some sort of presence that he brings. And getting rid of everybody, Kliff Kingsbury as well as Steve Keim, it's definitely something that the Arizona Cardinals needed. So I just think it was just completely, just culturally, he sounds like he knows exactly what he's doing. And I think that the players truly really bought into it, and they fought very, very hard for Gannon.
It just feels more professional in Arizona too. Like, it just feels like everything is just like actually orchestrated. There's an actual culture too. And Jonathan Gannon in his first year, they gutted this roster completely. Yeah. Like DeAndre Hopkins and Jonathan Gannon, Monty Ossenfort's first year, DeAndre Hopkins cut. Isaiah Simmons traded for a 7th round pick. Like, they know the kind of football team that they want to build. And people were speculating that Isaiah Simmons in preseason was playing lazy or whatever. And, he might not be on the team longer. And everyone's like, that's not going to happen. Next week, traded 7th round pick, no hesitation. And it's like, these guys know the kind of football team they want to build, the kind of character they want in this team, kind of culture they want to build. If you don't fit that, you're gone. Like, the past, I think, 4 drafts, we've retained like 2 people from the past 4 drafts, and it's Kyler Murray and somebody else. I'm blanking on the name, but 2 people. Like, that speaks volumes of how bad this team has been constructed in the past, and it's getting gutted and built the right way. And the culture, man, it's so nice. Like, I'm assuming the same thing for you and Dan Schneider.
100%.
You're seeing the culture shift. It's
100%
blessing.
Yeah, we should do another pod at some point where we can just exchange notes on ownership, because
right, and just go back and forth about all the bad that's gone down in the past 10 seasons.
Not good.
Yeah,
No,
100%. Last question for you, Craig. 2024 expectations for your Commanders. What are your thoughts before we let you go?
They're honestly not super high. Because of the quarterback situation. Like, this is ultimately a quarterback-driven league, and I do think that there's a really good chance, if they stay at 2, that either one of those guys that we talked about might not be ready to really start week 1. And so you're going in with Marcus Mariota, and like, that's not very exciting. I do think this defense could be pretty solid. They're kind of lacking an impact pass rusher, but I still think that there's a chance that some of these guys that like Frankie Louvu, they signed from Carolina, could pop enough, and they might be solid enough in other areas that they ultimately are pretty solid, like top half of the league defensively. It's just going to be a matter of offensively, like, what's the game plan? How much can they insulate the quarterback? And does Mariota or the number 2 pick play well enough to get them floating around 500? So I'm saying like somewhere between 6 and 9 wins, 9 being like a, wow, number 2 pick or Mariota has like way better season than we anticipated, but probably something in the 6-7 win range, but a gigantic pain in the butt to play every week. And that to me is a win. Like, be competitive week in and week out. I've covered a lot of bad football here. The end of last season was the worst football that I have covered. They were so uncompetitive week in and week out for like the final half of the season. I don't think there's almost any chance of that happening this year with the players and with the staff that they have. And it brought in with Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, and Josh Harris's kind of new vision for this team.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Craig, I appreciate your insight here on the Washington Commanders. I appreciate you for chiming in. If you do want to do another podcast, we can definitely chop it up. Obviously, you have contact with Justin as well. I appreciate you for joining in. Have a great rest of your day, man. Thank you.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one. See you.
Yep, have a good one.
All right. Great insight, if I might say so myself. I'm not sure how you felt about that, but I took a level of, man, okay, well, maybe a trade back is a possibility, but he also did mention the fact that if he was going to say right now, they're going to be picking at number 2. What are your thoughts here on the Commanders? Do you still think that, they're picking at 2 personally?
I mean, if they're sitting here, I do agree. I think it will end up being a quarterback. I think Drake May has always been the better prospect. That's just my opinion and everything. But Jaden Daniels is the one that's heavily rumored to be there. But Drake May has always been the better prospect. But you got a lot of fix with Drake May's game. I think they're kind of in that position where it's like, they did trade their quarterback. The intention is to pick a quarterback at 2. But if you're willing to give up 3 first-round picks, a second, and a 5th rounder, you have to entertain that at the bare minimum, because then you could trade up potentially, or with how the draft goes, quarterbacks fall. People fall past projections. They're all projections at the end of the day. Like, these mock drafts and everything we're seeing, it's not how it always plays out. Like, the intention is QB, right? It makes sense. They all traded their quarterback in the top 3. So it's like, you have nothing but to assume that Chicago, Washington, and the Patriots are going to go QB. It makes too much sense. But at the same time, I mean, if the right offer comes through, you can't help but entertain it. It's kind of the same thing for the Cardinals at 4, right? Like, it's like Marvin Harrison is the guy, but like, if Minnesota is going to give up this stupid offer where it's like, you're just looking at it like, am I reading this right? You have to entertain it at the bare minimum and be like, okay, listen, they're giving up 3 firsts, a second, and they're willing to trade up. Like, we can get back up. Right? And just take somebody else. Maybe JJ McCarthy. We can trade with somebody and get back up. I think they're going to go QB, but you got to entertain it.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating to hear, because like you said, man, we could do mock drafts for days and we can mock them a quarterback, but like what they're really hearing in DC is really fascinating to me, because the question, or I guess to me, I was like, oh, Jaden Daniels makes more sense, right? But he even said that May is the better prospect, and I think most of us could agree that Drake May is the better prospect. But He's willing to take a flyer, but if he was the GM, he could humor the fact of maybe trading back and potentially still get JJ McCarthy. So man, anything's on the table. And I think that's one of the most beautiful thing about, draft season, because anything's on the table, and that just kind of gets super excited. What are your thoughts overall on, actually, do you have any other questions pertaining to the Commanders? There's one topic I want to talk about, and it is Cardinals. Do you have anything else about the Commanders or what we just kind of went through in that podcast?
I'm just excited, man, for just draft and everything.
Yeah.
I think the Commanders are in a very interesting position, just like the Cardinals, because, we have a quarterback. It's completely different situations, but, it's just entertaining to, actually be able to have conversation with outside sources and outside media, because it gives complete different perspective on things. Because we might know a little bit of the insight, but they fully are in this, just like we're fully in it. We'll know a lot more than anybody else outside.
Right.
It's nice to have these conversations.
Absolutely. If you guys were asking why did we have a Washington Commanders guy on here, well, we're going to try to do, moving forward, leading up into the draft, we're going to try to get somebody that covers the respective team that just kind of, I don't know, right? What we're looking into getting maybe a Patriots guy, as well as maybe even a Vikings guy on the show as well. So definitely, if you like this type of conversation, getting a little bit of insight on what they're hearing on their end, definitely subscribe it up. We're going to be doing this throughout, heading into the draft. So super excited about it. But let's talk about the Cardinals here, right? We're a Cardinals channel. We love the Cardinals. It's our favorite team. Let's talk about the realistic, or I guess the possibility of the Eagles trading away premier pass rusher Haason Reddick, former Arizona Cardinal. What are your thoughts on this? Because the rumors are swirling around, and the Cardinals were linked to Haason Reddick. What are your thoughts?
I know you got a video about this. I got a video out about this. This is so tricky for me looking at this, because if this was 2 seasons ago, I wanted Haason Reddick. When he became an unrestricted free agent, I was saying the Cardinals should have been all in. It was the year Patrick Peterson was a free agent, and I believe signed a 1 year. So I believe it was 2 years ago. I was preaching for both of them to come back. And it's at a point right now where it's not the same. He's 29 years old, and you have to trade assets, and then you got to pay him. So there's a little bit of concern for me. If Haason Reddick just appeared here and we didn't have to give him anything, and he's just signed to a whatever deal, right? Then I'm taking it. But the fact that we're probably going to have to give up a 3rd or 4th round is my projection. It's hard because they are solidified. So that they have to trade him. And if the best thing is a 4th rounder, which it really might be, is a 4th round pick, is the best they could get. That's why in my video I said a 3rd or 4th. I could see him wanting that 3rd, but it really might be a 4th, because listen, we know you got your 2 guys. You are looking to trade off Haason Reddick, and we got to pay him. Take a 5th or take a 4th. Listen, we got to do all the heavy work. You want to get off this. You don't want to pay him. We'll take him. Here's a 5th. Here's a 4th. It's just tough, because this is a Jonathan Gannon guy. I think he would be productive here, but for how long?
True. I guess that is the big question out there, right? Pertaining to Haason Reddick, if the Cardinals did decide to, go after him. Now, we have the money. We absolutely do. It's just, does Monty and does Jonathan Gannon want to reunite? And I think I think it's more the story for Cardinal fans. I'm not going to lie to you. I think it's the nostalgia or the what if we kept him type of feeling when it comes down to Haason Reddick. But I did see this report from, granted, this is most likely a guy that kind of does what we do, but for his Rams. But he said this Eagles insider, Elliot Shore Parks, reported that a 4th round pick could emphasize on could get a deal done for Haason Reddick. So if it is going to be something like a 4th round pick for, bringing him in, and, like I've been saying here in the X/Twitter world, bring him home, would you be willing to give up a 4th round pick for Haason Reddick? Or is that contract and the age still something where you're going to kind of second guess? What are your thoughts?
It just kind of depends on the contract. I don't think I'd be necessarily hesitant on a 4th. It's just the length of the contract. What would you want to sign him to? I'm looking at a 2-year, maybe $22 million a deal a year. It is my kind of comfortability with that. I don't really know if I'd be willing to pay him past 31. I don't want a Shaquille Barrett kind of situation where he peaks at 29 and then you have him play. I believe Shaquille Barrett is 31 right now. Let me go ahead and take a look at that. He's 31 right now. So I don't want a Shaq Barrett kind of situation where you pay him and then the team just kind of falls off. And then you're allocating $20 million to an edge rusher who's not as productive. So I would. This is tough, man. Maybe a fourth, because edge is a position of need. This is what we need. We need an edge rusher.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So
I mean, a 2-year deal, like my guy Tyler here in the chat, he's saying a 2-year, $22 million, $18 million guaranteed. But like on paper, that sounds sweet. But I think right now he's getting paid. I think last time I looked, 15, 16. And I'm assuming he wants to get paid somewhere in the 20s. Like,
let's look up top edge rusher money right now. Let's go ahead and take a look. Highest
the top
paid.
edge rusher is Nick Bosa, and he's getting paid like 30 plus.
I think it's like 31 mil.
Yeah.
I think it's Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
He's making $34 million a year.
So we're not touching that. That's not happening.
Where do we think he falls? Because Brian Burns just signed for 28 a year.
Brian Burns is younger too, though. Like that's kind of like, honestly,
that didn't matter with Christian Wilkins, though. It was 27. I mean, he signed 27. So I thought he'd go for like 22, or I said I'd be willing 23 for him, and he ended up signing for like 27.50.
But I'm going based off of what Monty would do. You know what I mean? Like, I think there is a firm line of there might be interest in bringing him in, and he's still look at his last stats, man. It's been like 4+ season of just double sack seasons, man. So he's had a lot of production in his career outside the Arizona Cardinals, with the exception of the last year, what we ended up kind of letting him walk. But like, it just depends on what they're willing to do, right? I don't think Hassan Reddick is going to settle for anything under like 21, 22 mil.
I don't think it's going to go anything under 24. And let me go ahead and show you real quick why. I'm going to go ahead and pull up this graphic, because Montez Sweat just got paid by the Chicago Bears. If you take a look at that average a year, it's $24 million.
Yeah.
I don't think Reddick is going anywhere under 24. I feel like wherever he goes, he's going to want 24, and that is the minimum. And it's going to be a multi-year deal that he's looking for. And if Hassan Reddick is sitting here and he's like, hey, I want a 3-year 24, I don't think I could do it.
That's what I'm saying. That's a deciding factor right there, right? If the Arizona Cardinals did and bring him in, the 2-year, 22 million on paper, this sounds sweet, right? Like, this sounds sweet on paper, but like in the end of the day, I think he's going to want to get somewhere around the 24, 25 million, even 26 million.
Maybe 26, range. 27. We don't know. I mean, the Eagles didn't pay him for a reason. So maybe it's a lot higher than anybody's even anticipating.
Yep. So that's the big X factor right now. I think we all want, the story back. I think we all know that we want a this type of player back, but like, truly ask yourself, right? Like, let me ask you this real quick. If the Cardinals were going to make one big swing, because right now we have 30 mil, 20 something, a little under 30 mil in cap, and we're going to get some more when the post-June of DJ Humphries comes back and blah, 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 right? We can allocate that to the rookies. Okay. If we're going to make one big swing, what would you truly want the Arizona Cardinals to do? Right. And I'm not saying these are on the table or we heard this from the Cardinals. We're just talking speculations, because that's the beautiful part of this part of the season. Would you rather the Arizona Cardinals go after a Justin Jefferson? Let's say, for example, the Vikings did release him, or would you pay Hassan Reddick? Right. I don't think that's even a question, right? You would want to pay Justin Jefferson, correct?
Yes. I don't think the Vikings will part with Justin Jefferson.
I don't think so either.
But in a hypothetical, in terms of like, I'm going to keep it a little realistic. Man, personally, I wouldn't make a trade for anybody. That's just me personally, because T. Higgins, I feel like, is going to cost way too much for anything that I would be willing to come up with. I feel like it would be Hassan Reddick, but it would have to be like under my perfect dream scenario of like, listen, it's going to be $23 million a year on a 2-year deal. I would even pay him 24. I think I can get up to 24 for 2 years. It'd have to be a 2-year. It's not going anywhere past 2, but I would give you 24 for 2. I think that's fair. 48 mil for 2 years. I'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, because you can get the production this year, and then
if it falls off, then oh well, we got you for 1 more year.
True, and he's cleared off the books from there. Yeah,
it's only a fourth. So I mean, you kind of have these 2 years to be competitive, and then dabble in with whatever. Hopefully, BJ Ojolari takes that step.
True. So Justin Jefferson, I think we both agree. You would, but realistically thinking.
Yeah, because I think Marvin Harrison is the pick at 4. So I feel like you just kind of stay pat there. But like, if we did trade it, like me personally, like it might be like a little delusional, like genuinely, but like that's just kind of where I'm at. Like, why would I be anything but delusional? at number 4. Like if there's a generational wide receiver there, why would I not be delusional, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't have to move off this. Like Vikings fans have been coming at me. Like I don't have to move. Like you want to. I don't have to. You want versus have. I don't have to do anything, right? Like you have to get up here if you want it. Like bid high enough. You don't bid high enough? Cool. Marvin Harrison, welcome to Arizona.
Yeah.
Simple. That's as simple as it can get. So if it's not Justin Jefferson, the phone is hung up. I'm not entertaining nothing. And it's going to have to come up with some assets.
Well, we mentioned this before as well. Looking at the draft order for the 2024 NFL draft, there's several teams, man. There's several teams outside the top 10. You could even say maybe I heard a rumor about the Giants wanting to move off of Daniel Jones. Not necessarily mean like this year, but like the future plans is not Daniel Jones. So maybe they might take a swing at a quarterback. So like everything's on the table right now. And I think that's the beautiful part here of where we are at. We are not one of those teams that are going for a quarterback. And that's absolutely known right now that we are going to try to build around Kyler Murray for this next coming year. And we're going to have to figure out exactly how this goes down. So I'm excited about that, man. I really am. So Hassan Reddick, I guess let's sum this up here real quick. You are willing to pay Hassan Reddick on a 2-year deal, correct?
Absolutely. I'll go 2-year up to 25. Like I know it's $1 million and people are probably like, well, it's nothing. But like $1 million in my perspective is life changing. But hey, in the NFL world, it's like literally negotiations. Like Aaron Jones fought over that $1 million Green Bay and ended up getting cut over it because they wouldn't give it to him. And then Minnesota did. They were willing to give him his guaranteed money. Would you go up to 25? I think 24 is kind of where I'm set at. Like Montez Sweat got paid. I'd go 24 for 2.
I think if he gets a guaranteed, I think he would. I think he would if it's guaranteed. Because you hear a lot of these contracts that are like 3 years, 100 and something,
like
or even like 90 mil, but like 30 is guaranteed, right?
Like Taysom Hill's crazy contract.
Yeah, if you give him a contract that's like, let's say for example 24, right? So 2 times, say 40, like 2 year, 48 million, but guaranteed. That's a lot. That's a chunk of change for 2 years.
Like 42 guaranteed or something along those lines, where it's
and
mostly guaranteed. Yeah, and then you put some incentives in there, like you get double-digit sacks, you'll get 2, and then you'll get 2 here for double digits.
That's what I'm saying. So I love the story. I get he's 29. I get when the start of the year he's going to be 30. I get it, right? Production starts to go down when somebody comes 30, and that's a great reference in terms of Shaq Barrett. But I just see this guy. I do want to bring him back. It's just, are the Cardinals willing to do that? That's the biggest question out.
Price has got to be right.
Yeah. Price got to be right for sure. All right. So we haven't done a podcast in, I believe, over a week. So let's kind of dive into the draft here real quick. Just kind of sprinkle it in here. I know we have a lot of different content pieces here on our respected channels. What are your thoughts right now? What are you hearing in terms of rumors pertaining to the Arizona Cardinals at 4? Are you still in that same boat with the whole, if what's it called? Like, do you want to trade down? Do you not want to trade? What are your thoughts?
I don't want to trade down, but again, you'd be foolish to not entertain it. You got to listen. If Minnesota's coming crazy, then we'll definitely talk for sure. You want to throw 3 first-round picks and a second? I'm contemplating it. I love Marvin Harrison Jr. though, the prospect. It's just so game-changing. People apparently are kind of giving me backlash in my comment section. I'm kind of confused. Marvin Harrison.
This is exactly what happened last year. This is exactly what happened last year. This is exactly what happened last year when everybody was so gung-ho about Carter and Will Anderson Jr. So gung-ho. But the moment that people started to hear the thoughts of, maybe we can get more draft picks, people's minds just start changing like this. Yeah. I don't know where they're coming from or like that. I agree with you. I think if you're there at 4 and he's there, you got to pull the trigger, especially if the deal isn't sweet, right? Enough to trade back, because the Cardinals aren't in a position where we're desperate. We shouldn't be desperate, or at least I hope we're not desperate to try to get more draft picks, because generational talent or the best wide receiver and the if the way that we think it's going to fall, quarterback, kind of have to pull the trigger and go after him, especially if you're not getting a package that you feel very confident in to trade back. But this happened the same thing last year too. And I can definitely bookmark it, because I remember during March that Carter was such a huge name. Jalen, you need to get him at 3. Will Anderson Jr., you need to get him at 3. But when Jalen Carter had that whole off the field issue, we stopped talking about him, because Monty isn't going to go for those type of guys. We knew that. So then we started saying, okay, well, Will Anderson Jr. And somewhere down the line, people were like, oh, trade. Same thing happened last year.
I mean, I was cool with the one last year, though. That's the thing. This year, it's going to take me a little to potentially buy into that, especially if it's not for anything crazy. Like if it's not 3 firsts at the minimum, I would be pissed. Like if it's just for the 2 first rounds this year for Minnesota, who
you feel like we would have got. So you're talking about what? So switching over 11, we're giving them 4, and
we would get 11, 23, and it's just 4 because that's what people are saying. And I'm like, because I saw a mock from a Vikings fan, and we get 11 and 23, they get 4, and we give up like a 5th. I looked at that and laughed, like genuinely. I was like, "This is crazy!" Like,
that's all coming from Vikings fans or Vikings media. I almost assure you and promise you that.
Oh, for sure. But I'm looking at that like, there's just no chance. Like, if Monty Ossenfort looks at this the way I'm looking at it, it's crazy. Like, it's going to take another first at the minimum next year. That's like the minimum. I was like, you're not even throwing in 3. Crazy. It's just not happening. 11 and 23 aren't moving to 4. In my opinion.
We would be greedy enough to ask for something the following year too as well. So like, let's say for example, we give it 4, we take their 11, 23rd, we have our 27th. Maybe next year, you think a second would be?
It has to be next year first. I'm going 3 first. I'm not moving off 4 if it's not for 3 first at the minimum. Okay. Or, a first and Justin Jefferson. Because, like, why would I pass up on a receiver?
We need one.
Right? Like, we were complaining about weapons. And people are like, in my comments telling me, oh, we're comfortable trading back with 2 first. Right? Like, that makes sense. I'm like, not really. Because I don't think Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, or Marvin Harrison are going anywhere past 10. I think Neighbors is going top 10. I think Rome Odunze is going top 10 or 11. It just depends. Like, I just say you take Marvin Harrison. Don't overthink it.
I mean, there's also the option of trading back up too, which is what we did last year. But like, you're also playing a game, right? You're also playing the risking a game because who would you trade up with?
Right.
Maybe. I mean, they probably need a wide receiver too, so they're probably praying for a Rome Odunze or they might go offensive line.
The Titans are kind of set at receiver though, with Calvin Ridley, Diop.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's true. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's true.
I was praying the Patriots signed them. Just because, just be like, okay, they're not getting Marvin Harrison.
Nip it in the bud. Yeah.
And now there's speculation of them just doing everything. But I mean, it seems like they're going quarterback, but it's the NFL. BS happens all the time. So if it does happen, then I'd be a little more open to trading it. Obviously, because then that's my number 1 prospect gone.
So Chicago has 2 top 10 picks. There's no way they're not going quarterback and wide receiver. There's no way they're going to get a wide receiver. They're going to get a wide receiver. I know they just got Keenan Allen. Well, actually, they got Keenan Allen. They also got DJ Moore. Do you think they will still go wide receiver?
I think they would dabble in.
Or maybe
I think it's a different situation. I think it's a different situation as Tennessee. Because Tennessee is like very desperate at a lot of positions. Very desperate. Chicago, if there's a good... Because I feel like Chicago's defense in the back end of that season, if you watched it, Chicago's defense is crazy.
Yeah.
And they just retained Jalen Johnson. They don't need help on defense like that. They're kind of set there. It's a lot of offense right now. They just got Keenan Allen. They're going to get Caleb Williams. They got DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, they got Swift.
If they can go get a Rome Odunze, Rome Odunze, they just traded Justin Fields. That offense, crazy.
Yeah.
If they can land Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams.
Shoot, if we could land Rome Odunze and trade I would definitely like that. All right. So we're going to close up shop here. What are your final thoughts before we let everybody here in the podcast world go? What do you have going on your channel? Let me know before we close up shop.
We will have a video out today. So if you guys want to tune in, there will be a video dropping on both of our channels, right?
Yep, most likely.
So we will both have videos dropping today. So if you guys want more content from us, expect that within like the next 2-3 hours. I'm assuming we'll both drop somewhat around that time frame. But man, draft is just coming closer and closer and closer. And the excitement levels just keep getting raised. Every single podcast we do, we just keep creeping.
Yeah. I agree. All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. If you guys missed the first half of the show, we talked everything with an insider here with the Commanders as well. So definitely check it out if you guys haven't so already. Smack the like button if you guys haven't done so already. Appreciate you for tuning in as always. Have a great rest of your day and great go Cards.